This episode of New Politics was released on the 19th of June, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
Why does one nation keep fighting the same old cultural wars that have been going on for the past 30 years? And why does the mainstream media keep giving Pauline Hanson a free pass? The only thing Pauline Hanson has got to offer is fear and loathing and division, and we have to keep calling it out. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And if you're listening in and haven't subscribed to our website at New Politics, you're missing out on half of what we do. There's regular articles and analysis of this strange world of politics. It's all free, and you can subscribe at newpolitics.com.au. And of course, if you do want to support us, it's just $5 per month at Patreon and Substack, and all of this is a good way to support independent journalism. Pauline Hanson made her first appearance at the National Press Club, and it was the usual claptrap of far-right politics and division. And it's almost like 1996 all over again. It was that same old culture of complaint that she's had for well over 30 years. And David, if you didn't actually know who she was and you started listening in somehow, you'd think that she was one of those drunken hacks that calls talkback radio late at night, complaining about everything that they can think of and just cannot shut up. I don't know if I'm being unfair or not, but that's how it feels. But the address itself, there were the usual complaints about too much immigration, migrants, Muslims, government wasting too much money, the United Nations, vaccinations, cuts to Indigenous funding, getting rid of SBS, too many abortions. She actually spent a massive amount of time talking about transgender issues and then navigating that back to Islamic culture as well for some strange reason. Talked about nuclear power, and then she went on through the usual contradictions that she comes up with, saying that workers don't have enough money in their pockets, but then she also wants to support businesses to cut the wages of those same workers. And the problem that I see, David, is that this is the same type of garbage far-right politics that has infected the United States, and it's infecting the UK. And that's where you get people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage complaining about absolutely everything and then offering simple solutions that don't actually fix anything and actually make things worse. And I think we're getting a clear example of what happens when you put in a person with no idea in the United States. That's a pretty obvious example, but generally the art of politics is giving people what they need, but making it seem like you're giving them what they want. And it's also balancing the needs of 28 million people that live in Australia. And I think that what Pauline Hanson wants for Australia would only satisfy a very small group of people, and it would set up a seriously divided country, and it would actually take the country backwards, not forwards.
Pauline's argument hasn't changed. She's learned nothing in 30 years of Parliament or in 30 years of public life, where she must have met thousands, if not tens of thousands of people from all different types of backgrounds, where she's been to debates and affairs with Muslim people, with trans people, with women who've had abortions, where even if you still disagreed with refugees, with Asians, with Middle Eastern people, even if you disagreed with them after, surely your approach would soften. You'd say, okay, I've met people from this and they made some points, and I now get this part of the argument. I still don't agree, because we can't have miracles, but I don't think it is as bad as I thought it was, because I've had this experience. And she seems to have none of that. Now, I know that a lot of it is performance. The politics of theatre, as Menzies spoke about it. The idea that you get up and you pretend to hold opinions that you don't really hold, either for political reasons or for social reasons or for pure getting the message through reasons. If you look at, actually, Anthony Albanese is a good example.
Well, came into Parliament on the same day as Pauline Hanson all the way back in 1996.
And he's a different figure today than he was then. Now, we can agree and disagree and what have you, there were many people disappointed in Anthony Albanese's approach as Prime Minister, wanting that young 35-year-old firebrand to come back at 65 or and I don't know his age. Hello, Anthony. But it's the change has been shaped through decades of parliamentary experience. Again, you don't have to agree with the change, but Anthony Albanese has learnt from dealing with people how to deal with people. He has taken on points of view that he had no idea of or disagreed with and adapted them into his worldviews because he's seen them as being right. This isn't to say that he's the greatest Prime Minister who ever lived. Hello again, Anthony. But it is to show that he has behaved as a normal, non-hate-filled person would. Even Bob Katter has softened some of his views. Bob Katter is father of the house. He speaks very differently on homosexuality now than he did 30 years ago. Partly, I know that there are personal circumstances in that his brother, I think, or a family member came out as gay. And that changed his perspective, and good on him for that. I don't agree with much of what Bob Katter says, but we must give credit where it's due. Pauline Hanson hasn't changed her opinion on things. She's just widened the hate. And it shows in her face. It shows in her attitude towards things. And it defeats me how she hasn't at least softened in some areas. How you can live in modern Australia and not think multiculturalism has worked. May not be perfect, but it's worked. We don't have race riots very often, and the last one was caused by white people, specifically Alan Jones. That was 2005 in Cronulla Beach. We don't have a lot of racial tensions. Indian people and Pakistani people live in the same suburbs. They mightn't speak to each other, but they're not hurting each other. And in fact, often they do speak to each other because they've left those conflicts behind. And I've just picked Indian and Pakistani as one high-profile case of neighbours who don't like each other very much.
But I think it's not just a case of 30 years in public life or 30 years of being in politics. No. Like over 30 years, people do change. Like whether they're a public person or not, you become more sophisticated in your outlook of life and understanding of how the world operates. But for someone like it's been 30 years of this right-wing garbage coming from this person. That's when Pauline Hanson first arrived on the scene, same day as Anthony Albanese. But in 1996, she turned all of that stuff that racist families discuss at the dinner table, and that's where it usually stays. It remains there, but she's taking it to a national audience. That's what she did back in 1996. And here's a family interview that the 60 Minutes program did at that time.
How do you react to the gay Mardi Gras, which is really a celebration of homosexuality?
No, I don't like it. Because it's promoting something, okay, that is not natural.
Welfare payments to single mothers.
I look at it this way. Why should the government support single mothers with their first, second and third child? First one okay, as a mistake, but why should we keep paying for the second and third and fourth and so on?
Do you think that national service is a way to restore that respect for authority, that sense of discipline?
I do. Yes, I do. You see, what I've called for is more or less a civil service upon finishing the year 12 or reaching 18 years of age, and a 12-month national service. And what's happening is we're having overeducated people out there. We're getting overeducated people, and we haven't got the jobs for them. If they went into a service and they could do things like building roads, bridges, railway lines. Roads, bridges, railway lines, reforestation, look after our environmental, our rivers and everything like that. Teach them trade.
Many of Pauline Hanson's visions are like that. Visions that are rooted in the past. Simple, homespun solutions learned at the family dinner table. And forget about political correctness, it's definitely not served up with a tea and sticky bun in this household. Do you feel that we're in danger of being swamped by Asians?
Well, if you go back to when I was young, I was always taught the yellow race will rule the world. And if we don't do something now, until we catch up a little bit, I'm afraid, yes, the yellow race will rule the world.
And this is old style Australian racism, and sure, it's never actually gone away. And I'm always bemused by these situations where people bring up all this sort of rubbish every night at the dinner table against people that they'll never know or they'll never meet. And I'm just wondering what sort of joy that gives people. Some people like sport, some people like food, some people like books, some people like TV, cinema. Well, I guess some people just like racism. That's what they do. But this was all framed at the time as a backlash against political correctness gone mad all the way back in 1996, and also a backlash against Paul Keating. And that was happening at a time when Australia had gone through a lot of economic change and also a lot of social and cultural change. And this time around, we can see clearly what Pauline Hanson is all about. It's not so much a fear of change, because change happens every single day in the world. It's that fear of difference. And it is clearly racist, even though she keeps saying that she's not a racist. Well, that's what all racists will say. She's also got the support of Gina Reinhardt, and she's a person that was born with a silver spoon in the mouth. And I reckon if you squint a little bit, David, Hanson and Gina Reinhardt actually look very similar, and they sound the same. They've got the same far-right ideology. But generally, I just think that all of this needs to be called out for what it is, and we have to keep doing that.
Yeah, I'm coming to the view that Pauline Hanson's worst or most effective argument against her is Pauline Hanson. Let her talk. Where she's making roads into the sensible centre a little bit. She lost all of them yesterday in the National Press Council. It was embarrassing. I didn't watch all of it. I watched highlighted bits of it.
Oh, well, I'm not suggesting that she shouldn't speak at all. I'm suggesting that we should interrogate her completely. Yeah.
She's got the right to have whatever opinion she likes, provided, of course, that it doesn't create violence against other people.
And that's what pretty much she is encouraging. She might not say it directly, but that's what all of this is encouraging.
Yeah. And again, her issue is not so much that she's not very bright. It's definitely not that she comes from a working class or lower middle class background. Our greatest, I've said this before here, our greatest Prime Minister, Ben Chifley, or at least one of our greatest Prime Ministers, Ben Chifley, was a railway driver, train driver, which at the time was not terribly glamorous work.
Billy Hughes was a printer, is that right?
Chris Watson was a printer. Yeah, Hughes was all kinds of things. I think Umbrella Maker is the one that, Umbrella Fixer didn't even make them, but if your umbrella broke, you took them to Billy in Balmain and he fixed them. Lyons was a teacher.
Well, it just goes to show that all sorts of people can become Prime Minister or can become an MP. Predominantly, they do come from the legal class, but anyone can become the Prime Minister. So that's never going to be the dispute. It doesn't matter what sort of background that you've got. But
can you do the job?
Yeah, of course. But it's never going to be a thing about shutting up Pauline Hanson. She can speak as much as she likes. But as I mentioned, we've got to have the right to call her out as well.
Yeah, I know. And she needs to be called out. Her Australian history is wrong. I was trying to think of a better word, but it's wrong. Australia has been a multicultural country for 40,000 years. Every wave of immigration has improved it, with the possible exception of 1788, which did not improve the lives of the people already living here. But certainly there's been no bad people we've let in. I think we need to let her talk. And then we need to say, this is where you're wrong, and this is where you're wrong, and this is where you're wrong, and put the onus of proof on her. Now, of course, the confirmation bias of a lot of her supporters isn't going to accept evidence. They're not going to accept facts. It's like arguing with conspiracy theorists. And in fact, in the Venn diagram of Hanson supporters and conspiracy theorists, there's not a lot of gap. It's not quite, but it's almost a complete circle. Fact just gets twisted. So with the idea that if they lose a court case, the courts have been taken over by the woke establishment. If the ABC does a report that they don't like, then it's elites running the ABC who don't like us. If the family court decides that your son isn't fit to see his children very often, then we close the family court down.
Oh my God, it's 1933 all over again.
It's 1933 all over again. Simple solutions to complex problems and identifying problems where none exists. As I said, Australia is one of the most successful multicultural nations in the world, partly because our legislation doesn't put up with nonsense. You're not allowed to make racist slurs. It's a shame that legislation is there, but it has to be there. You're not allowed to discriminate against people because of their cultural or national background. This is right. It can't get rid of the unconscious biases we all have, but most people can rest assured that if they lost a job, it wasn't because of their background. It was because of if they went for a job interview and lost a job, it wasn't because of their background, gender, sexuality, religious. It was because someone else was just a better fit. Now, even that's problematic and pushes a lot of stuff underground. But it has started to level that playing field. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it has started to. The followers of Hanson don't quite get that this is better for everybody and ultimately better for them. They just see people from different backgrounds in jobs that they feel that they should have. And I'll pick a profession at random. Nursing, why is this Asian lady a nurse? Why can't I be a nurse? Years of study, qualifications, experience. And
why can't I be that doctor?
Yeah, why can't I be that doctor? And how do we know where that doctor was born? And there was a shortage of doctors in Australia for a long time, filled from people from overseas, the vast majority who've enriched the medical community. Again, there's always rotten eggs, but we see the rotten eggs as they should be, exceptions to the rule, not the rule. The rule is the vast majority of health professionals in Australia are among the very best in the world, despite their ostensible background.
This is New Politics, independent analysis of Australian and international politics. For more free articles and analysis, join us at newpolitics.com.au.
So I will say, don't expect a divisive welcome to country from me. This beautiful country belongs to all Australians born here and those who have come to join us. I would like to acknowledge the men and women that have sacrificed their lives for our democracy, our freedom, for our country. Immigration or immigration policy has our country in the state of crisis. At the centre of this crisis is the utterly flawed policy of multiculturalism. We cannot be a multicultural society, but we must be monocultural. Australians must live under the one cultural umbrella. My views haven't changed.
And on to the speech itself. It was 50 minutes of complaint, 50 minutes of grievance, of misinformation, had all the culture war talking points in there. And it's the same style of rubbish that Peter Dutton was pushing in that last term of Parliament. And that was thoroughly rejected by the electorate at the 2025 election, except this time around, the way that I see it is that what One Nation and Pauline Hanson is pushing through is a lot more extreme. And the other issue is that this is the National Press Club. There's a room filled with journalists there. I think it was their largest crowd ever, but they were expected to seriously scrutinise her. But aside from one or two questions, most of the questions were inane puff piece questions that Pauline Hanson could easily bat away. There was one excitable dude from The Spectator who kept on fantasising about a One Nation government.
Next question, Michael De Percy from The Spectator.
Thank you, Senator Hanson, for your address. There are no hypotheticals about One Nation possibly being in government anymore. These are facts, and I wanted to ask you about the Australian Public Service, and particularly its major role in policy. In recent times, the APS has become increasingly politicised, or at least critiqued in that way. How do you see a One Nation government, let me say that again, a One Nation government, managing its relationship with the public service?
David, this is how fringe politics becomes normalised. When the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition or the Leader of the Australian Greens, pretty much anyone at all, and especially if it's a Labor Member of Parliament, well, they get the heavy questions at the National Press Club. They do get interrogated, and this is what you want. This is what you expect within a democracy. But Pauline Hanson, well, it just seems like there's this fear of offending the supporters of Pauline Hanson and the supporters of One Nation. It's hard to know why, because they never hold back in offending anyone else that's within earshot. And during the National Press Club address, there was also a protest banner that was revealed on stage behind Pauline Hanson. And the banner outlined that Pauline Hanson actually voted against wage increases for lower income workers. And we can't dispute that. That's actually a fact. And I think that
while taking a $100,000 pay rise.
Yeah, for herself. And I think that is a very important thing to know, because the journalists in the room in the National Press Club, well, they weren't going to ask the question, so people need to know about that. And it was actually a stunt set up by Get Up, and critics are now saying, oh, no, this is all going to play into Pauline Hanson's hands. But pandering to her agenda and tiptoeing around what she has to say, well, that hasn't stopped her at all over the past 30 years, and she's still lingering around the national stage like a bad smell. But taking her on directly on all of these peripheral issues, that might not work. But I think attacking her on economic issues and things like wages, I think that will definitely work. And we need to have a case where maybe not all of the ideas will be attacked because there's just not enough room to attack every single idea. But bad ideas do need to be challenged, and especially bad economic ideas. And maybe that's the avenue. Attack her, leave all the other bullshit behind, as offensive as that is, but attack her on economic policies because that's where she is most vulnerable.
That's where she first lost it, if we remember. She said all we need to do is put 1% tax on each part of manufacturing. Carburettor, because that's what cars were made of, costs $20. 1% of that is 20 cents.
I think there was also the 2% bank tax as well on every single transaction.
Yeah. What she didn't understand that interest compounds. And so suddenly your littlest transactions were worth hundreds of dollars because of the effects of compound interest. The whole thing about abortion, it's never really been, it hasn't been an Australian issue for many years. Once states started legalising it, it stopped being an issue. So it's coming in from American billionaires and people like Gina Rinehart. Now, One Nation did try and solicit money from the National Rifle Association and other American right-wing organisations and was caught out for it by Four Corners. So, yeah, in 2019, they tried to get money. They were unsuccessful in that, probably because James Ashby isn't that impressive a fellow in the flesh, but that I probably shouldn't comment on. More likely because they couldn't care less about what's happening in Australia, and they had their man in Canberra or their woman in Canberra, Gina Rinehart, funding them anyway. Or maybe Gina thought that it would be cleaner for the money to come from Australia rather than overseas, particularly for a party that's concerned about overseas influence in Australia. But the whole transgender thing, men playing women's sports.
They always bring it back to sport as well.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, really, who cares?
If the sporting organisations aren't smart enough to be able to work out fair rules, and if the sporting organisations aren't, the bookies are, the gamblers are. It's such a little thing.
But David, I think the bigger issue is that this is just such a minute issue. It's not a problem. It's just this really tiny issue. And she spent
over 5 or 6 people.
Yeah, and she spent 5-10 minutes talking about it at that National Press Club address, and also making that link to Muslim communities in Australia. And that was such a radical segue into that. But I just think that the most important thing is that One Nation shouldn't be indulged. And a lot of their support is coming from, well, there's 2 parts. First of all, it's the collapse of the Liberal Party. But I think it's also because people are frustrated because governments are not delivering enough for people. And we've criticised the Labor government for its slow progress on many issues and not doing enough as far as implementing a true Labor agenda is concerned. And if they had, we might not be discussing these issues today. But the point is that the simple slogans that Pauline Hanson keeps pushing, well, they just do not solve complex problems. And I thought about this before. I thought Pauline Hanson should play something like Sim City to see how difficult it is, because if you appease one group of people, well, that's going to upset another group of people. And then if you try and appease those people, that upsets a different group of people. And then you try and keep those people happy, and that upsets the group of people that you were trying to appease in the first place. I'm making it sound simple, but essentially that's the essence of politics. And that's the one thing that Pauline Hanson and One Nation, they just do not understand. And if we want to see where they're heading, well, just have a look at the 2025 federal election. Peter Dutton painted this dark, dystopian, sort of fearful image of Australia and was longing for this past that never actually existed. And the Liberal Party ended up with their worst election result in history. And this idea of everything is terrible, it's woeful, trans people are out to get you and win the running race, or the scary migrants out there. Like, I think people just want a bit more positivity in their life, and all this agenda from One Nation is just so bleak and negative.
They're not positive because they've got nothing positive to say.
And this is the problem that Peter Dutton had in the last election.
Yeah, and he seemed to realise it too late in his concession speech, which showed the grace and the dignity that we were told we'd had but never saw. We've never been told that Pauline Hanson has grace and dignity. There's a little bit of she's a nice person in the flesh to meet, but even then I wonder to whom is she nice? You and I, Eddie, mightn't have a problem, but I wonder if my Lebanese neighbours might have a problem seeing the nice part of Pauline Hanson in a face-to-face meeting. Yeah, and all this American, we've got to stop abortion. But that's a complex issue. What about women who it's the baby or the mother? What about women who can't afford to have children? What about women who are having children who will be so profoundly disabled it would be cruel to give them life? And then, of course, as we've seen in the States, once a child is born,
there's no support.
There's no support. The book Freakonomics found the link between falling crime rates and rising abortions because women who couldn't afford to have children were choosing to have abortions. And as a result, you were getting less children born into desperate straits and having to turn to crime as an option. I don't want to simplify it down to just that, of course, and I don't want it to sound like I'm advocating eugenics, by no means. But the links were fairly clear that these two were connected. Now, again, it goes down to the choice of the woman. Some people will have the baby even though they can't afford it, and that's fine. We should be giving those mothers support. Some people can't afford it, and that's fine. The point is it shouldn't be up to a all-encompassing piece of legislation, and it's an un-Australian thing to have this American evangelical Christianity, which is where the anti-abortion thing comes from in the States, and impose itself on Australia. And again, the trans issues, homosexuals, she's quieting down on homosexuals a bit. We're back to Middle Eastern immigration, aren't we? It was African for a while.
Middle Eastern, Islamic people. So she's developed...
But not the Christian Muslims.
Yeah.
They're okay.
She's developed a little bit over the past 30 years, but not much. And we've received a bit of feedback and criticised for even discussing One Nation and Pauline Hanson. And the claim is that all we're doing is giving her more oxygen. But the point is that, I mentioned this before, bad ideas need to be attacked and discarded. And we're never going to apologise for that. And the thing is that all of these groups and all of these people are being attacked. Indigenous people, trans people, gay and lesbian people, migrants. And Personally, I feel like I'm being attacked here as well, David, and a lot of this is white supremacy stuff as well. And Pauline Hanson is a big supporter of Zionism as well, so she's getting the double whammy there. And if you're hearing all of this stuff, you can't just stand back and say, well, look, your ideas are absolutely repulsive and divisive and will cause division, but please go on and we're not going to say anything about it. And I'm pretty sure that complaining about it isn't going to stop Pauline Hanson from being this divisive git and the mindless twit that she is. But if you don't call her out, public debate just becomes weaker. And then you get experts that are being undermined. There's all these follow-on effects. Migrants will continue to be scapegoated. Indigenous people blamed for pretty much everything. And my feeling is that the community just has to collectively go and tell Pauline Hanson to get fucked, because that's pretty much what she is saying to everyone else, and probably go out there and use different words if you need to, but essentially that is what needs to be done.
Exactly.
More politely.
Yes, please get fucked. Thank you. But if Hanson wasn't getting vital airtime that could be going to the Greens, the Democrats, the Young Socialists, the Marijuana Party, all of these other groups who you might argue are fringe groups, but who have just as much validity as One Nation, and in some cases more, I'd safely ignore her. But we can't afford to ignore her because this is how these ideas become mainstream. We have a press that prefers her. Channel 9 only reported, as far as I could tell, in her speech, because her speech was so demented, and even Channel 9, who aren't a left-wing radical organisation, and I don't think anyone at Channel 9 would be offended at me saying that. Channel 9 only reported on the fact that she wanted the ABC changed somehow, make it less woke somehow, and SBS abolished because we don't need it anymore. And of course, Channel 9 has never wanted the ABC or SBS. It's competition to them. It's understandable when you look at it in that way. It's fair enough for them to have that opinion, but I noted that they didn't report on very much else, probably because even the good folks at Channel 9 realised that this stuff was not optimal intelligence. I might put it that way, since we're being polite. But they still gave her the airtime. The National Press Club let her speak, and it was the biggest turnout they'd had in a long time, which is interesting. When Francesca Albanese spoke, we got a lot of how radical it was and what a ratbag she is and all of this. When Pauline Hanson spoke, who is radical and a ratbag, we get, oh, she's got a right to speak. And even a bit of, she just says what we're all thinking. She doesn't say what I'm thinking. She doesn't say what you're thinking.
Well, how do we know what people are thinking?
And
That's
yeah,
the thing.
what?
The silent majority. Well, if they're so silent, how do you know what they're saying?
If they're so silent, how does Labor win 2 elections in a row, increasing its majority each time? Now, I know that there'll be those who say, oh, it's because the AEC is woke and it let Labor win. No, it's not quite like that. Just Labor had the better strategists and the better message. I think we've seen One Nation's peak. I think now it'll be a slow decline till Labor wins another big majority. This isn't I hope this happens. This is what I can see happening. They may lose a couple of seats. They lose 5 seats. They still have 89 seats or something. Of course, things can change. But Anthony Albanese is a much better party manager and a much better political manager than Keir Starmer in Britain, who's looks like he's about to lose his massive House of Commons majority if he makes it to the election. I don't think Labor's going to do that. Much as we will continue to criticise Labor policy where it needs to be criticised. One Nation isn't going to fill the vacuum that a pretty much destroyed Liberal Party has left. I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think they've got the electoral appeal outside of certain rural areas and the press.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month, and we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.